Story 1. The observatory that kept logging signals. The static hum of old machinery is the first thing that hits you. It's a sound that should be dead, a ghost in the wires of a place that officially went silent decades ago. This is the Blackwood Peak Observatory, decommissioned, abandoned, and according to the files on my desk, completely inert. My job is simple, a final structural assessment before the demolition crews move in. Just a formality, they said. Tick the boxes, sign the papers. But standing here, in the cavernous dome, with the colossal telescope looming over me like a silent god, I can't shake the feeling that this place is anything but inert. The air is cold, colder than it should be for a sealed building in late spring. It clings to you, heavy with the smell of dust and ozone. My footsteps echo in the vast circular chamber. Light streams in from a grime-covered skylight, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a silent swirling galaxy. Everything is coated in a thick layer of gray. Control panels with their rows of dead switches, chairs overturned in a long-forgotten hurry, and yellowed papers scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. It's a perfect time capsule of abandonment. My task starts with the main control room, just off the observation deck. The door groans open, protesting its first use in years. Inside, it's a crypt of obsolete technology. Magnetic tape reels, bulky monitors, and panels studded with thousands of buttons and dials. I pull out my tablet to start the checklist. Structural integrity of the support beams. Check. Condition of the foundation. Check. Asbestos survey. I'll leave that to the specialists. It's all mundane, routine work, a stark contrast to the palpable sense of unease that's starting to crawl up my spine. That's when I hear it. A soft click. I freeze, listening. Silence. I dismiss it as the building settling. Old places make noises. But then, another click, followed by a low-frequency hum that seems to vibrate right through the soles of my boots. My eyes dart around the room. All the main power is cut. Nothing in here should be making that sound. The hum grows, a deep, resonant thrum that makes the loose papers on the floor tremble. It's coming from the main console, a sprawling desk that looks like the command center of a spaceship from a vintage sci-fi film. I approach it cautiously. A single, small red light is blinking on one of the panels. It pulses in a slow, steady rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Then a pause. 1, 2, 3. A pattern. My heart is starting to pound against my ribs. This is impossible. I trace the wires from the back of the panel. They're thick, ancient cables, all leading to a junction box that has been very clearly and very deliberately severed from the main power grid. The wires are cut clean through. There is no source of electricity. I lean closer to the blinking light. Beneath it, a label is etched into the metal, almost completely faded. Signal integrity monitor, channel 7. My rational mind is screaming for an explanation. Residual charge? A hidden battery backup? But this equipment is 50 years old. No battery would last that long. The humming stops as abruptly as it began, plunging the room back into near silence, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breathing. The red light, however, continues its silent, rhythmic pulse. I try to ignore it, telling myself there's a logical reason, and get back to my checklist. I move back into the main dome, my attention now on the telescope itself. This is the heart of the observatory, a true giant of its time. I walk around its massive base, running my hand over the cold, painted steel. It's aimed straight up, a silent sentinel pointing to the heavens. As I circle it, I notice something on the floor, directly beneath the eyepiece assembly. A series of deep scratches in the concrete. They aren't random. They form concentric circles, a complex pattern that looks almost like an orbital diagram, but for a system I don't recognize. And in the center, a dark reddish-brown stain. I touch it. It's dry and flaky, old. I try not to think about what it could be. A sudden loud crack echoes through the dome, and I jump back, my flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness. High above, one of the gears on the telescope's rotational mount has shifted. A loud metallic groan follows, the sound of immense weight moving protestingly. The entire telescope, all several hundred tons of it, begins to turn. It moves slowly with a deep, grinding shriek of metal on metal that sets my teeth on edge. It's not possible. The motors are disconnected, the gears seized with rust. yet it moves. I watch, mesmerized and terrified, as the colossal instrument rotates, its huge lens swinging away from the zenith and turning, impossibly downwards. It lowers its gaze, moving with a deliberate, unnatural grace, until it's no longer pointing at the sky. It's pointing directly at the main control room, directly at the panel with the single, blinking red light. The grinding stops. Silence returns, thick and suffocating. The telescope is now aimed like a cannon, its target clear. And then, from the control room, a new sound begins. It's not the hum from before. It's a chattering like rapid-fire Morse code, but higher pitched, more organic. It sounds like 1,000 insects clicking in unison. The sound of a transmission. My training, my experience, everything tells me to get out, to run from this place and never look back. But my curiosity, or maybe some deeper, more primal fear, holds me rooted to the spot. I have to know. I walk back towards the control room, the clicking growing louder, more frantic with every step. I peek through the doorway. On the main screen, a monitor that should be a blank, lifeless tube of glass, lines of green text are scrolling upwards. It's not a language I can read. It's not any language I've ever seen. Symbols, geometric shapes, and complex, shifting patterns. A stream of data from an unknown source. The clicking sound is coming from a dot matrix printer on the side of the console. A piece of paper is feeding out, covered in the same alien script that's on the screen. The printer is hammering out the message, line by line, with a desperate urgency. The red light on channel 7 is no longer blinking calmly. It's flashing manically, a frantic crimson strobe. This place isn't dead. It was never just an observatory. It was a communications hub, a receiver. And whatever it was built to listen to is still broadcasting. Suddenly, a deafening blast of static erupts from the room's speakers, so loud it feels like a physical blow. I stumble back, hands clapped over my ears. The static isn't just noise. There are patterns within it, whispers and voices hidden in the wall of sound, speaking in a language that makes my head spin. The lights in the dome flicker violently. The ground beneath my feet begins to vibrate, not from machinery, but from something deeper, something resonating with the signal. I look up at the telescope, now a dark silhouette against the flickering light. A low, harmonic hum is emanating from the lens itself, and the air around it seems to shimmer, to distort, as if under intense heat. The signal isn't just being received anymore. This place is starting to respond. The decommissioned observatory is preparing to broadcast a reply. My job was to assess a dead building. But I've stumbled into a conversation that started long before I was born and is now reaching its terrifying conclusion. I need to leave. I finally turn and run. The sound of the static and the alien chattering chasing me out into the fading light, leaving Blackwood Peak to its cosmic appointment. Thanks for watching. Story 2. The After Hours Floor. The 18th floor of Halcyon Financial Tower had been sealed for 6 years. The company downsized, consolidated departments, and abandoned the entire level rather than break the lease. Officially, it was closed due to renovation delays. Unofficially, no one wanted to work up there anymore. I was hired by the property management firm to inspect the electrical grid before reopening the floor for new tenants. 3 nights. After business hours, alone. The rest of the building remained active until 9 p.m. After that, the elevators required keycard override. My card allowed access to floor 18. When the elevator doors opened that first night, the air felt different. Not stale, not dusty, just untouched. Rows of cubicles filled the space, monitors still mounted to desks. Chairs tucked neatly beneath workstations. It looked less abandoned and more paused, as if employees had simply stepped away mid-shift. The power to the floor had been disconnected at the breaker panel. Emergency lighting remained functional, casting the room in a dim amber glow. I walked the perimeter first. No broken windows. No vandalism. Everything orderly. I noticed the first change near the conference room. A whiteboard that had been blank when I entered now had a faint line drawn across it. Single horizontal mark. Perfectly straight. No marker lay nearby. I wiped it clean with my sleeve and continued my inspection. When I returned 10 minutes later, the line had reappeared. This time vertical, intersecting the previous position, crosshair, centered on the board. I checked the security cameras. Floor 18's system had been disabled years ago. No recording, no monitoring, just dead wiring. The elevators were the only access point. No one had passed me. The second anomaly occurred in the accounting section. A stack of paper files sat neatly on a desk. As I documented the area, the top folder slid forward, not falling, just repositioned toward the edge. I pushed it back, stepped away. It slid forward again. Same distance, exact alignment, not random motion. Deliberate. I tested airflow by holding a scrap of paper in the air. No draft. The HVAC system had been fully shut down. The room was still, yet as I walked away, 3 more folders slid forward in sequence, left to right. The overhead emergency lights flickered briefly. When they stabilized, several chairs had rotated, facing the central aisle, not their desks. Me, I stood still. The silence pressed against my ears. Then, slowly, one chair rolled forward 6 inches, its wheels turning without hesitation. Stopping directly in front of me, it didn't crash, didn't jerk. It moved like someone had pushed it gently, an invitation, or a challenge. I stepped around it. The chair pivoted, tracking my movement. Another chair in the far corner rolled slightly as well. The motion spread through the floor like a ripple. I heard the faint click of a keyboard. 3 keystrokes, pause, 3 more. The sound came from the far end of the room. I walked toward it carefully. A monitor flickered to life. Green text on a black screen. There was no power source connected. Yet the screen displayed a blinking cursor, waiting. I didn't touch the keyboard. Still, letters began appearing on the screen, one at a time. Stay. The cursor blinked again. Then the text erased itself. The file cabinets along the wall rattled faintly. Not violently, just enough to draw attention. One drawer slid open 3 inches, mirroring the earlier cabinet behavior. Inside the drawer sat a sealed envelope. No label, no postage. When I reached toward it, the drawer slid shut abruptly. Firm, decisive. The overhead lights dimmed momentarily. Every chair on the floor rotated simultaneously, facing inward toward the center of the office, forming a loose circle. The conference room door creaked open slowly. Inside, the whiteboard now displayed multiple intersecting lines, a grid pattern. Centered exactly where I had been standing earlier. I felt it then, not a ghostly presence, not cold air or whispers, but agitation. Space felt active, responsive. Every movement I made triggered adjustment. I stepped backward toward the elevator. The chairs rolled forward collectively, not chasing, just reducing distance, maintaining formation. Keyboard clicks resumed, faster this time. Multiple desks activating in sequence. Monitors flickering on and off, all displaying the same blinking cursor. One screen displayed text again. Return, and then another across the room lit up. Finish. The words disappeared almost immediately. The file cabinets slammed shut in unison. The whiteboard erased itself clean. The chairs stopped moving. The floor fell silent again, too silent. I reached the elevator and pressed the call button. Nothing happened. The lights above the button flickered, but didn't illuminate. Behind me, the chairs began rolling again, slowly closing in. The emergency lights dimmed further. The monitors flashed briefly all at once. The single word filled every visible screen. Work, then darkness. The elevator doors slid open without a sound. I stepped inside immediately. As the doors closed, I watched through the narrowing gap. Every chair returned to its original desk. Every monitor went dark. The office reset. The property firm postponed reopening the 18th floor indefinitely. Maintenance reports now include unexplained electrical surges after midnight. Cleaning crews refuse to service that level alone. The whiteboard has been found marked several times despite being wiped clean. A single straight line, perfectly centered, as if something up there is still tracking productivity, still waiting for employees to return, still operating, even after hours. Story 3. The sublevel that didn't exist. It started with a simple assignment: audit the basement storage of the municipal records building. Minor flooding had warped some files, and I was sent after hours to document damage and ensure structural stability. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. Buildings like this hum with fluorescent monotony, not dread. The basement was cold. That's normal. But as I moved along the rows of steel filing cabinets, I noticed a subtle draft brushing my neck. The HVAC system wasn't active in this section. I froze, thinking it might be an air leak, but nothing matched its direction. I shifted the cabinets aside, one by one. Behind them, the wall seemed unremarkable, until a faint seam caught my flashlight. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a vertical indentation running the height of the wall. Something was hidden. I pressed against the seam. The wall gave slightly, enough for me to perceive a recessed door. I hesitated. Most people would have called it in. I didn't. My curiosity outweighed protocol. Pushed it open, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into pitch darkness. The air grew colder the moment I stepped inside. Not dangerously cold, just unnatural. The concrete walls were rough and bare, unlike the painted basement above. Dust coated the steps, and there were no footprints. Not a sign of human in years, if it was even ever used. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a corridor. It's too long, longer than the building's footprint should allow. I double-checked the blueprints in my head. There was no way this space existed, but perception can be misleading underground. I forced myself to keep walking. The beam of my flashlight barely touched the walls as I advanced. The air felt heavier, pressing against my chest. Each step echoed, but not normally. The sound bounced strangely, delayed and warped, like the space itself was absorbing portions of it. About 20 steps in, I saw the first anomaly. A dark handprint pressed against the concrete wall. Fresh, not dusty. Its proportions were subtly wrong. Fingers slightly longer, the palm unnaturally narrow. I felt a chill move through me, but I rationalized it as stress-induced imagination. There were more. They appeared along the wall in even intervals, perfectly aligned. Something had walked this corridor, leaving its mark deliberately. My stomach tightened. Rational explanations failed. A sense of observation pressed in from all sides. I glanced back at the stairwell. It looked farther than before. Hadn't walked that far. The corridor had stretched subtly. My pulse quickened. My mind tried to normalize it, but the discrepancy gnawed at me. Something about this place was fundamentally wrong. I moved forward again. The shadows shifted unnaturally along the walls, though there was no one there. A vertical distortion appeared halfway down the corridor, a smear of darkness interrupting the flat concrete surface. Tall, narrow, featureless, and yet aligned with me. I stopped. The distortion froze. No movement, yet it felt alive. I stepped right. It pivoted instantly. There were no eyes, no discernible features, but the sense of being observed intensified. Every instinct screamed that this entity, whatever it was, knew me intimately. The air chilled further. My breath became visible in front of the distortion. Behind me, the corridor felt normal. The cold radiated from it, as if the entity carried its own microclimate. My flashlight flickered slightly, the beam dimming as it passed through the anomaly. I inched forward. Static prickled along my arms. The distortion elongated, stretching upward toward the ceiling. The corridor walls seemed to contract subtly, just enough to create a claustrophobic impression. Rational thought clashed with instinctive fear. I stepped back. The distance corrected immediately. It wasn't moving. It was adjusting, calibrating, maintaining a fixed radius relative to me. The realization struck with a visceral weight. This thing wasn't passive. It was intelligent. The handprints along the wall darkened as I passed. Another appeared ahead, forming in real time. I reached out instinctively, but nothing tangible existed. Still, the cold pressed into my fingers, and the static grew stronger, like energy building in anticipation. My mind raced. I considered retreating, yet the exit felt farther than before. Perspective had been altered. The hallway, the air, even time seemed off. I was walking into a space that wasn't fully part of the building, yet somehow anchored within it. The distortion expanded, taller, broader, not advancing but filling more of the corridor. The temperature dropped further, code loudly in my ears. Footsteps no longer registered. Sound itself had been muted within a radius around the entity. I tried to reason, This is a sublevel designed for equipment. Maybe ventilation, maybe mold, maybe settling concrete. But each thought collided with the sensory data, distortion, cold, static, real-time handprints, and the entity's alignment with me. I raised my flashlight to illuminate it fully. The center of the beam dulled, edges bent around the distortion. Light didn't just reflect, it warped. My heart pounded. The corporate dread, the meticulous, ordered building, was corrupted in this sublevel. Its rules no longer applied. I took a cautious step backward. The entity adjusted, maintaining distance, maintaining orientation. I realized it wasn't just in the corridor, it was interacting with me. The environment, the air, the space, it responded to my presence. Every rational explanation frayed. Static crawled along my arms, stronger than before. The handprints continued forming. The entity's influence expanded vertically and horizontally, yet it didn't advance. It didn't need to. Its presence alone controlled the space, warping reality, muting sound, chilling the air, twisting my perception. I began retreating toward the stairwell, cautiously. Every step felt swallowed by the distorted corridor. The temperature remained cold. The handprints continued ahead of me, forming as if guiding or warning. My flashlight flickered sporadically, reacting to the entity's proximity. Halfway back, I glanced over my shoulder. The distortion was still perfectly aligned with me, tracking me. Not chasing, not aggressive, just precise. It maintained a fixed distance. Awareness became oppressive. I realized rational thought had limited utility here. I reached the base of the stairs. The corridor seemed to contract again, subtly, as if reluctant to release me. The static along my arms and back intensified. Each rung of the stairwell resonated under my feet. The sublevel itself seemed alive, responsive, tied to the entity. I climbed quickly, rising toward the basement floor. Each step was deliberate, measured. The entity did not follow physically, but maintained its influence on the space. When I emerged into the lit basement, the warmth of fluorescent light was almost painful. Relief washed over me. I slammed the hidden door shut. The seam disappeared into the painted wall. The filing cabinets were exactly where I had left them. No evidence of the stairwell remained. Everything above ground returned to corporate normality. It was as though the sublevel never existed. I spent the next day checking blueprints, asking colleagues, and reviewing historical records. No sublevel, no hidden stairwell, no access, just solid concrete. Everything I had experienced should not have existed. Rational thought failed to reconcile it. Later, alone in the same basement corridor, I paused near where the hidden door had been. The air felt colder. I felt a faint brush along my spine. A handprint, nearly imperceptible, appeared on the wall's paint. My skin prickled. Rationally, I told myself it was residue or shadow. But deep down, I knew better. The sublevel hadn't been destroyed or erased. It only returned to its hidden state, waiting. The entity, or whatever it was, remained aligned with me. The corporate walls and fluorescent lights above couldn't contain it. It existed just beneath the surface. I would never forget the draft, the handprints, the awareness and the part of that space that still followed me, even in daylight. Story 4. The Forgotten Chapel. I first noticed the chapel during a survey of rural properties for historical documentation. Its brick walls were half swallowed by ivy, the wooden doors sagging as if they bore the weight of decades. I stepped onto the cracked stone path, expecting quiet decay, but even the air seemed unnaturally still, pressed against me like a warning. The doors resisted as I pushed. They groaned loudly, echoing through the empty courtyard. Inside, the musty smell of damp wood and mildew hit me immediately. Patches of sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting dim colors across the dust-covered pews. Silence filled the space, perfect, oppressive, like a held breath. I ran a hand along the pews. The dust lifted in faint clouds. Old hymnals lay scattered across the floor, their pages yellowed and curling. Each step I took reverberated strangely, sometimes louder, sometimes muted. The chapel seemed aware of me, responding to my movement. I tried to shrug it off as imagination, but a cold line of dread ran down my spine. The altar was intact but coated in thick dust. Candlesticks were upright, though the wax had long crumbled. As I approached, I felt the temperature drop slightly, just enough to make my breath visible. The sun's warmth from the broken windows above did nothing to counter the cold that pressed down like a physical weight. I heard a creak above. The balcony swayed slightly, though there was no wind. I froze. My rational mind told me it was rotting wood settling, yet the timing was too precise. The building's quiet response felt directed at me, as if it were testing my presence, observing how I reacted. Moving cautiously along the side aisle, shadows seemed to shift subtly with my flashlight beam. They weren't chasing me, they weren't hiding. They were aware, shifting slightly whenever I looked elsewhere. A creeping awareness that I was not alone settled in my chest. I paused at a pew. A whisper reached my ears. Not a word I could understand, but the tone was pleading, urgent. I turned sharply, expecting a trick of the wind, but the chapel was still. No drafts, no ventilation, nothing that could create sound. Yet the whisper persisted, rising and falling with intention. At the back of the chapel, a confessional booth stood open. The door hung crookedly, and the air around it felt colder still. I peered inside, flashlight illuminating nothing. The darkness inside seemed denser, heavier, and yet I could feel eyes unseen, yet unmistakable, tracking my movement. I tried to leave. The doors, however, seemed to have shifted in position. The exit felt farther than it should. My pulse quickened. Rational thought told me the building hadn't moved, but perception was already warped. The chapel itself seemed aware, adjusting the space subtly, imperceptibly. A pew toppled silently to my left. No sound except for the soft scrape of wood against stone. My stomach knotted. The chapel was responding, testing me, reacting to my fear. It had rules, and I was learning them the hard way. I glanced at the stained glass. One panel displayed a shadowy figure that shifted when I changed my angle. I blinked, thinking it a trick of the light, but the movement was deliberate. Not a reflection, not a distortion. Something was present, just beyond the visible spectrum. The whispering grew, layered into a chorus of indistinct tones. I pressed my ear to the confessional. The sound seemed to travel inside the wood, beneath the floorboards. From nowhere, yet everywhere. Rational explanations dissolved. This place was alive, and it was aware of me. My flashlight flickered. In that instant, a presence pressed against the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. Only dust motes floated in the light, but instinct screamed that I was not alone. Every nerve in my body tensed in anticipation. I approached the altar. One candlestick tilted upright on its own. Wax fragments fell silently. The chapel responded to my movement. It was learning, observing, cataloging. My fear only encouraged it. The balcony creaked again. The figure appeared, featureless, moving with deliberate slowness along the railing. No footsteps. No shadows outside the light. Yet its gaze, if it could be called that, was unmistakable. I felt weighed down by awareness. I rationalized. Ritual remnants. Historical quirks. Structural shifts. But all explanations collided with my observations. Moving objects, responsive shadows, whispers from nowhere. The chapel was sentient. It interacted intelligently with my presence. I moved toward the exit. Each step echoed unnaturally, sometimes amplified, sometimes swallowed entirely. The chapel's acoustic properties were no longer consistent. Space itself had been warped, subtly, to create tension and disorientation. At the doorway, my flashlight illuminated a handprint on the floor, blackened and damp, pointing toward the altar. Hadn't noticed it before. Its surface was cold. The chapel's message was clear. I was being watched. The whispers intensified. The tones were rapid, overlapping, almost intelligible. They were responsive to my thoughts, urging me to leave before curiosity trapped me. I realized fear was being weaponized, subtle, patient, invisible. I pushed toward the exit. The shadow on the balcony adjusted slightly, was not pursuing, but monitoring. My flashlight flickered violently as if the entity was manipulating reality, bending light itself to communicate presence. I stepped back, almost stumbling. The floor felt uneven, rippling slightly under my weight. My mind screamed the laws of physics did not apply here. Each step toward the door was met with resistance, subtle, imperceptible, yet undeniable. The corridor leading to the entrance lengthened. What had been a short path stretched into a long, oppressive hallway. My pulse raced as spatial distortion intensified. The chapel was aware of my pace, adjusting dimensions around me. The balcony figure descended. No sound of movement, yet it was closer. The whispers now formed a rhythm, pulsing in sync with my heartbeat. Every instinct screamed that hesitation meant danger. I darted forward, almost colliding with the altar. Candlesticks toppled again. Pews shifted. Shadows stretched toward me with unnerving elasticity. The chapel's intelligence was patient, learning, exploiting each microsecond of my panic. I realized it cataloged me, my steps, my reactions, my attention. Each movement shaped its response. It was a game, subtle yet precise. The exit appeared slightly closer, but still distant. The shadow withdrew marginally, like a predator allowing me to escape temporarily. My flashlight sputtered, illuminating the balcony figure's featureless face briefly before darkness swallowed it. I slammed the doors open and stepped out. The air warmed instantly. Sunlight struck me directly, almost painful after the dim, distorted interior. Relief washed over me, but rational thought couldn't reconcile what I had experienced. I reviewed my photographs. Images showed empty pews and dust-covered floors. One frame, however, captured a faint silhouette behind the altar. I had not seen it with my eyes, a ghostly reminder that presence was persistent, even if invisible. As I walked away, the whispers lingered, not audible, but lodged in my mind. Reason told me it was adrenaline and imagination. Instinct told me otherwise. The chapel had marked me, observed me, tethered me to its memory. Later that week, I returned with a local historian. The chapel appeared ordinary, silent, dust-laden, and still. Nothing moved. Yet when I touched my camera, I felt cold like a faint handprint pressed against the case. I understood then that the chapel had not forgotten me. Even days later, the memory of the whispering echoed in my thoughts. Every sound in old churches seemed amplified. Shadows held weight. My perception had been altered by the chapel, leaving me hyper-aware and unsettled. I tried to describe the event to colleagues. They laughed or nodded politely, but I knew it was real. Space was aware. The entity, whatever it was, had intelligence, intent, and patience far beyond human understanding. Researching the chapel's history revealed nothing remarkable. A small, defunct rural congregation, abandoned for decades. Yet everything I experienced suggested centuries of subtle learning, observing each visitor, each disturbance. I returned one final time, standing outside the chapel, documenting from a distance. The building seemed inert. The ivy-covered bricks no longer carried the weight of the unseen, and yet instinctively I knew it still existed, just hidden, waiting for the next observer. I left the property with a sense of lingering awareness. That quiet dread would remain with me forever. I had crossed into a space that defied ordinary rules. The chapel had responded, adjusted, and left its mark. I would never forget the whispers, the shadows, or the sense that I was still being watched. Story 5. The apartment above. I moved into the apartment complex on a gray Tuesday. The building was older, but the rent was affordable and the location convenient. I didn't notice anything unusual at first. The hallways smelled faintly of mildew, but that was common in structures this old. My unit was on the second floor. As I unpacked, I noticed subtle knocks from above. Wood settling, I thought. But the rhythm was irregular, sharp, staccato, almost like deliberate tapping. I ignored it. The first night, I was awakened by a loud bang in the ceiling. I jumped out of bed, flashlight in hand. Nothing had fallen in my apartment. The ceiling tiles were intact, the floor above silent. Over the next few days, objects began to shift slightly. A book moved from the shelf to the middle of the table. Pens rolled across the desk without cause. Each time I entered the apartment, the room felt charged, as if some invisible presence had been waiting. The sounds grew more aggressive. Cups rattled in the sink when no one was near. The knocks intensified at night, louder and more insistent. I tried rationalizing air currents, vibrations, neighbors, but nothing accounted for the timing or specificity. One morning, I woke to find the living room furniture rearranged, couch cushions stacked, chairs lined up in odd angles. I lived alone. Panic rose in my chest. Whatever this was, it was testing me. I tried recording overnight. Cameras picked up shadows flickering, but no clear figure. Yet the sound of objects moving, soft footsteps, and thumps were unmistakable. The poltergeist, or whatever force it was active, deliberate, and intelligent. I spoke to the building manager. She shrugged. Older apartments do weird things, she said, but her face betrayed unease. She didn't mention that previous tenants had left abruptly. That evening, dishes fell from the countertop. I was in the kitchen. No vibration, no wind. They crashed onto the floor. My pulse surged. Presence wasn't subtle anymore. It was becoming hostile. I noticed patterns. Objects shifted more when I was alone. Knocks occurred near the bedroom, hallway, and ceiling. The poltergeist seemed to have a territorial awareness, responding to my movement in the apartment. I attempted to ignore it, focusing on work, cooking, anything to distract myself. But even in daylight, the taps and scratches persisted. The air seemed heavier in certain rooms, almost resisting my presence. I tried recording again with a phone. The footage was mostly normal, but the audio picked up scratches, whispers, faint laughter. It wasn't human. It didn't obey natural rules. My heart raced as I replayed the clips. One night, the bed shifted under me, not slightly, a deliberate shove. I grabbed the mattress edge, trying to stabilize myself. The shaking stopped. Silence. Then a single, sharp bang from the ceiling directly above me. I began to dread evenings. I barricaded doors and drawers, yet objects still moved. Cups, plates, books, even clothing sometimes left my closet in heaps on the floor. The poltergeist had rules but didn't respect boundaries. It simply tested limits. The knocks turned into hammering sounds. Not subtle, not distant, directly above my head. I felt the ceiling vibrate. My rational mind screamed explanations, construction, neighbors. But there were no humans, no cause. Only the unseen force asserting control. I stayed awake one night, flashlight in hand, recording. The ceiling seemed to ripple above me. Shadows stretched and twisted. Suddenly, a book flew from the shelf, narrowly missing my head. My pulse hammered in my ears. I tried speaking to it aloud. "Stop, please stop." Nothing. Then a vase rolled off the table in response to my voice. The poltergeist seemed to recognize commands but ignored them, choosing to escalate instead. I began to note patterns in activity. Certain hours were more active late at night, early morning. It seemed almost like it had a schedule, monitoring my behavior and punishing deviations from normal routines. Food left uncovered would be moved or broken, as my shoes rearranged. Drawers opened and slammed. Each day brought new signs of intelligence. Not malevolence yet, but the stress it caused was psychological torture. The ceiling above developed a faint indentation, as if pressure was applied periodically. Every time I looked up, it seemed deeper. The apartment was being manipulated in ways I could see and feel, but not touch or prove. I stayed with friends overnight, but the apartment remained active. Even when empty, the knocks, scratches, and movement continued. It was autonomous, not dependent on my presence, yet somehow amplified when I was home. Furniture toppled in patterns, forming shapes on the floor. Books stacked in triangular formations. Random items aligned against walls. It was intelligent, systematic, yet chaotic. I realized I was dealing with a poltergeist capable of intentional mischief. I attempted cleansing rituals, salt lines, holy water, incantations, but nothing held. Each attempt provoked retaliation. A chair thrown across the room, lamps smashed, cabinets flung open. The poltergeist wasn't just playful. It was aware and reactive. I slept in shifts. Exhaustion began to affect my perception. One night, I swore I saw a figure on the ceiling, crouched, watching. A shadow darted from one corner to another. Every muscle tensed. My rational mind clashed with my senses. The building manager eventually admitted prior tenants had reported disturbances. Some had moved out abruptly. Some had recorded inexplicable events. No solution was offered, only vague warnings about older apartments. I began documenting everything: sound, movement, energy. The poltergeist escalated daily, seemingly learning from my efforts. Plates thrown, books rearranged, drawers emptied systematically. It wasn't trying to harm me physically, but the psychological strain was growing unbearable. I noticed a pattern in the chaos. The poltergeist targeted my workspace most frequently. Pens, notebooks, even my laptop shifted or fell. It seemed aware of where I spent focus and energy. It was almost as if it wanted me to stop living normally. One night, the ceiling above groaned loudly. My bed shifted violently. Objects flew around the room. I stumbled to the door, desperate. For a moment, the apartment fell silent, but then a whisper of laughter echoed faintly from above. I realized my presence mattered. When I ignored the apartment, it seemed less aggressive. The poltergeist wasn't random, it was reactive. It studied me, experimented with fear, and learned my patterns. I sought professional help. Paranormal investigators confirmed poltergeist activity, residual energy amplified by stress, fear, and presence. It's mischievous but dangerous if ignored. Their assessment matched my experience, yet offered little relief. I attempted to adapt. I slept during the day, left lights on, avoided patterns. Still, objects moved, shadows flickered, and taps echoed from above. The poltergeist's presence was relentless. It didn't need visibility to dominate the space. My mental state frayed. I questioned reality. Each sound, each movement, each whisper chipped at my confidence. Friends no longer visited, fearing the apartment themselves. The poltergeist had isolated me, yet left me functional just barely. One night I confronted it. "Leave me alone," I shouted. Silence followed, and a vase spun violently in a circle before crashing. The message was clear, it had rules, and I was learning them the hard way. Eventually, I moved out. My belongings packed, the apartment returned to quietness. For weeks, the building remained empty. But I knew the poltergeist still lingered. It thrived on observation, presence, and fear, waiting for its next resident. I left with lingering dread. Every knock, tap, or shifting shadow in other buildings reminded me of it. The poltergeist wasn't gone. It had left a part of itself with me. Psychological imprint of chaos, mischief, and fear I would carry indefinitely.